Today we're going to look at solving linear systems by adding or subtracting. So another name that you might see is a name referred to as elimination. That's the same thing as adding or subtracting. Eliminate means that we are going to make one variable go away. Okay, so if you look at step number 1, it says add or subtract the equations to eliminate one variable. Let's look down at example A. Example A has two equations, 2x plus 3y equals 11, and negative 2x plus 5y equals 13. What we can do is we can actually add or subtract the columns. So here's how we know which one to do. If I look at negative 2 and positive 2, how can I get those to equal 0, or how can I eliminate that letter? If I subtract them, if I do 2 minus negative 2, it equals 4, but if I add them, I get 0. So right here, I put a plus sign because I'm going to add each column. If I add 2 and negative 2, I get 0x. If I add 3 and 5, I get 8. If I add 11 and 13, I get 24. Now, 0x plus 8y can be simplified. 0x can really be crossed out. 0 times x is just 0. So if I add it, it doesn't change anything. So here I am left with 8y equals 24. 8 times what number equals 24? If we divide both sides by 8, if I say divided by 8 and divided by 8, 24 divided by 8 is 3. So that's part of our answer. That 3 would go down as our y answer. Let's go back and find the x. In order to find our x answer this time, we need to take one of the equations, so I used the first one, and I copied it over. 2x plus 3y equals 11. Then what I did was I said, hey, I actually know what y equals. Y equals 3. So where I saw y in the equation, I changed it to a 3. So 3 times 3 equals 9. 2x plus 9 equals 11. If I subtract 9 on both sides, I now have 2 on the right side. And if I divide both sides by 2, I get 1. So I just solved that equation on the right side after I plugged in 3, and I get this nice ordered pair, 1, 3. So that's an example of how we start with two equations and we use elimination. We add or subtract to get an ordered pair for an answer. Let's look at example B. Zoom in here so you can see a little better. We start with two equations, 4x minus 3y equals 5, and negative 2x plus 3y equals negative 7. The way I give these to you is if we can see that one of the letters has the same number in front of it, whether it's 3 or negative 3 in this case, that means we're ready to add or subtract. So if I think about 3 and negative 3, if I do 3 plus negative 3, would you agree that equals 0, right? So if we're going to add this column, we also need to add the x column, and we also need to add the constant column. So all three columns should be added. Now we're left with 2x plus 0y equals negative 2. How did I get that? I did 4 plus negative 2 to get 2, negative 3 plus 3 to get 0, and 5 plus negative 7 to get negative 2. Now 2x plus 0y is the same as just 2x. So 2x equals negative 2. If I divide both sides by 2, I get negative 1. X equals negative 1. So that's part of our answer. But now we need a y number. So let's come up here. Hopefully you can see that I just copied this equation from what was this first one on top. We could use the second one, but I just grabbed the first one. Now, the next step would be to plug in a negative 1. Instead of an x, I put our answer from before. So 4 times negative 1. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Then I add 4 to both sides. I get 9 on this side. Negative 3y on the other side is still there. My last step is I divide both sides by negative 3, and that gives us our answer of y equals negative 3. So there's the y part of our answer. So remember, we used graphing, we used substitution. This method is called elimination. Let's go to a few more of our examples on this front side. Now, I'll let you try those on your own. Go ahead and try those on your own. Here's an example of what your answer should look like. See if you can get there yourself. But now we're going to go to the second page where we're going to actually use subtraction this time. So this example 2 says use subtraction to eliminate a variable. So before we were adding, this time we're subtracting. Let's zoom in on the first example and see why. Take a look at the two equations. Which letter has the same coefficient in front of it? The number in front of the letter, which one is the same? These 3's match, but they're both positive 3's. So we need to ask ourselves, would I do 3 minus 3 to get 0 or 3 plus 3 to get 0? Three minus 3 or 3 plus 3? Hopefully you agree that 3 minus 3 equals 0. What that means is if we're going to subtract our y column, we also need to subtract our x column and the column with our constants, the 2 and the negative 2. So let's look at our result. When we subtract both columns, 4 minus 5 is negative 1. 3 minus 3 is 0. 2 minus negative 2 is 4. Notice I said 2 minus negative 2. 2 minus negative 2. Not 2 minus 2, but 2 minus negative 2. After that, 0y goes away. 0 times anything is just 0. So we're left with negative 1x equals 4. If we divide both sides by negative 1, we get a final answer of negative 4. Okay, again, that's because we divide both sides by negative 4. Or negative 1, sorry. So that's the x part of our answer. We still need a y number, though. That's when we take our x number and we plug it back into one of the equations we started with. 4x plus 3y equals 2, but then we change the x to negative 4. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. If I add 16 to both sides, my 2 turns into 18. And then if I divide both sides by 3, (18) divided by 3 is 6. So our final answer would be y equals 6. That's here it is in our ordered pair, -4, 6. Let's look at one more example real quick. Let's slide over to letter B. Okay, look at our two equations. Which letter has the same number in front? Does the X letters have the same number in front, or do the Y letters have the same number in front? I think the X numbers do. They both have 7s. And 7 minus 7 gets us to 0. -2 minus -3 get us to 1. So remember I said -2 minus -3. If you type that in a calculator, you'd end up getting +1. On the other side, 5 minus 4 is 1. 0x will just go away. 0 times any number is still 0. So we're left with 1y equals 1. Divide both sides by 1. We get this final answer of y equals 1. But that's only part of our answer. We have to go back and find x. So I copied the first equation from above, and we plug in a 1 for y. 2 times 1 is 2. If I add 2 to both sides, 5 plus 2 is 7. That's where this 7 comes from that I highlighted in green. Now if I divide both sides by 7, I get x equals 1. So that's why we have a 1 in the x position for our final answer. I would like you to try letters C and D. Check your answers when you're done. Try them without looking, but then make sure you have the correct example written down when you finish. We are going to skip example 3. If you would like to write it down and examine what was going on, you can. Really, it was just some problems where the letters are not lined up when we start. So if you look at the second equation, it doesn't really line up with the one above it. So we would have to move our 3x to the left and put it back where it goes. Now we have the x's lined up, the y's lined up, and the constants lined up. From there, it's the same process as what we did above, either adding or subtracting. So make sure you have everything written down correctly. Thank you for listening.